Imagine this. You're standing in front of a mirror, staring at your reflection. The person looking back at you is someone you know, but someone you don't fully understand. You've spent years trying to become the person you are now. You've cultivated your talents, honed your skills, nurtured the qualities that make you unique. And yet, as you look at yourself, a strange feeling creeps in, a feeling of something missing, something incomplete. You feel a strange disconnect between the person you want to be and the person you've become. Have you ever wondered why this is? Why, after all your efforts, the journey of self-improvement feels like it's always missing something essential? Why, despite reaching certain goals, something still feels unfulfilled deep down? Here's the paradox. Your greatest strength is also your greatest wound. You are the embodiment of both your gift and your wound. And this tension, this dichotomy, has been quietly shaping your life without you even realizing it. In fact, the very qualities you pride yourself on, the things that make you unique, are often the roots of your deepest struggles. Does that make sense? Or does it feel like I'm speaking in riddles? It's easy to think of our gifts as separate from our wounds. We like to think that we are defined by our strengths, the skills we've honed, the wisdom we've acquired, the successes we've achieved. We push away the parts of ourselves that feel broken, weak, or unworthy. We reject them, bury them, tell ourselves they don't belong. But in doing so, we create a fracture within. The wound doesn't disappear just because we refuse to acknowledge it. It waits, quietly, patiently in the background, ready to remind us of its existence at the most inconvenient times. Have you ever been caught in the grip of fear or anxiety, even when you know you're capable of much more, or felt that creeping sense of frustration, as though no matter how much you achieve, it's never enough? Or perhaps in moments of success, you've noticed an odd feeling of emptiness, as if reaching the peak only reveals how much further there is to climb. These feelings don't arise from nothing. They arise from the very contradictions at the core of your being, the brilliant parts of yourself that are tightly intertwined with your darkest fears. Take a moment to reflect. What are the qualities you admire most in yourself? Are they the same qualities that cause you the most pain? Maybe you pride yourself on your intelligence, your ability to analyze, to solve problems. Yet, don't those same sharp powers of intellect sometimes alienate you from others? The more you think, the more you question, until nothing feels certain. You find it difficult to connect because your mind races ahead, distancing you from those around you. Or perhaps you're a deeply empathetic person. You have an incredible capacity to understand others, to offer comfort, and to help. But doesn't that same empathy sometimes leave you drained, exhausted by the weight of others' emotions? Your sensitivity becomes your vulnerability, the thing that pulls you under when the world becomes too overwhelming. You see, we've been conditioned to believe that we must develop our strengths at all costs, that self-improvement is a linear process of adding more, achieving more, becoming more. We don't realize that in pursuing our strengths with such zeal, we may inadvertently be deepening the wounds we've been running from all our lives. It's a vicious cycle, one that Nietzsche would describe as the eternal return. The very traits that propel us forward also drag us back. The more we try to overcome our limitations, the more they rise to meet us. The more we elevate our strengths, the more they threaten to collapse under the weight of their own contradictions. But why does this happen? Why are our gifts so entangled with our wounds? Perhaps the answer lies in the very structure of human nature. You see, we are not just passive recipients of the world around us. We are creators, constantly shaping our identity, trying to make sense of the world in a way that feels authentic. But in doing so, we often overcompensate for the parts of ourselves we feel are lacking or broken. This overcompensation becomes our greatest strength, but it also magnifies our deepest insecurities. It's as though we build our lives around the parts of ourselves we most fear or dislike, trying to protect them by turning them into something useful, until those very parts demand our attention, uninvited. The paradox is undeniable. We carry our wounds in the very qualities that we believe define us. But what if this isn't a tragedy? What if it's a design? What if your deepest struggles are also the key to your greatest potential? What if the source of your pain holds the very answer to your transformation? This isn't a question of fixing something broken, of erasing the parts of yourself you consider flawed. It's about integrating them, understanding the dance between strength and vulnerability, light and shadow. It's about seeing your gift through your wound rather than despite it. Are you ready to explore this deeper? to confront the uncomfortable truth that the wound is not something to be escaped, but something to be understood, to find out how your struggles might actually be guiding you toward a more authentic, powerful life. The next step is a journey inward, a journey where you will face not just your weaknesses, but the core of who you are, the forces that shape your identity, your desires, and your relationship to the world around you. Stay with me, this is just the beginning. Now, let's unravel the mystery that underlies this paradox, the intertwining of your greatest gift and your deepest wound. It's not just a cosmic coincidence. This tension has roots buried deep in human psychology and the very structure of our existence. To understand why your strengths and wounds are so deeply connected, we need to explore the forces that shape the human psyche and the way society conditions us to view ourselves. First, consider this. From the moment you are born, you are thrust into a world that demands something from you. The world doesn't ask you to be who you truly are. It asks you to become someone who fits into the roles it has already defined. There's an invisible contract, an unwritten agreement that demands you conform to expectations, to labels, to ideals that often have little to do with your true self. And in that moment of pressure, the core of your identity begins to form, not from a place of authenticity, but from a place of survival. Carl Jung spoke extensively about the concept of the shadow, the parts of ourselves that we reject, deny, or hide because they are too painful, too uncomfortable, or too inconvenient. These parts are often tied to experiences or beliefs we've absorbed throughout our lives, starting from childhood. But the shadow doesn't just disappear when we turn away from it. Instead, it waits in the dark, influencing our behavior in subtle, often destructive ways. You might pride yourself on your independence, your self-sufficiency, but could it be that this very strength is a reaction to a deeper wound? Perhaps in childhood you experienced neglect or abandonment, leading you to build an identity around the need to prove that you don't need anyone. Your gift of independence is really an armor that protects you from the fear of vulnerability, the wound of feeling unworthy or abandoned, and though this strength has served you well, it keeps you isolated from true connection. The very thing you cherish, your self-sufficiency, might be the thing preventing you from experiencing deeper relationships. Think about Friedrich Nietzsche's idea of the will to power, the drive to assert oneself, to dominate, to rise above weakness. Nietzsche believed that every human being has an inherent will to overcome limitation and suffering. But this drive often comes from a place of profound insecurity. The desire to assert dominance, to prove yourself, to make your mark on the world, is often born out of a wound. The fear of not being enough, the fear of weakness. The paradox is clear. The more you attempt to transcend your weakness, the more you create the conditions that ensure it lingers in the shadows, waiting to surface. It's not just about individual psychology. This dynamic is also deeply rooted in societal forces. Modern culture, for example, is obsessed with performance, success, and external validation. From a young age, you're taught that you are valuable only insofar as you meet certain standards: academic achievement, career success, physical appearance, and social status. The message is clear. Your worth is tied to what you can produce, what you can show the world. And in this pursuit, you develop strengths, becoming highly competent in some area, excelling in a specific domain, but you also develop an unhealthy relationship with the very nature of your worth. This is where Jean-Paul Sartre's philosophy of existentialism becomes relevant. Sartre argued that we are condemned to be free. That is, we are thrown into existence without a predefined essence, and we must create our own meaning and identity. But in doing so, we face the agony of choice, of having to confront the question of who we truly are. Our strength, our ability to create meaning in a meaningless world, is also our greatest burden. For in creating meaning, we are constantly forced to face the emptiness that lies beneath the surface. We create masks, identities, roles, because the alternative is confronting the abyss of existential doubt. What you call your gift might be a mask, a coping mechanism that shields you from the deep existential wound of nothingness, the fear of being lost, of not mattering, of being insignificant. Schopenhauer might say that our pursuit of meaning is a reaction to the sheer pain and futility of existence. Our strengths, the things that we cling to for identity, are often a defense against this brutal truth. And yet, we continue. We push forward, developing our gifts, achieving success, building the image of who we want to be. but deep down, there is a quiet awareness that something isn't quite right. It's as if we're constantly building a tower to escape from something that always seems to be just beneath our feet. This, in essence, is the paradox of the human condition. The more you try to run from your wound, the more it shapes who you are. The more you try to overcome your fear, the more your life becomes a reflection of that very fear. Your strength is a reaction to a vulnerability, and that vulnerability never truly disappears. It only changes form, evolving into something more subtle, more insidious. The root of this issue lies in the fundamental misunderstanding of what it means to be human. Our culture prizes the idea of mastery, the notion that you can conquer your weaknesses, perfect your strengths, and rise above the chaos of existence. But this is an illusion. Perfection is an unreachable ideal. No matter how much you achieve, no matter how much you cultivate your strengths, the wound remains. It's not a question of conquering your wound, it's about recognizing that it is an integral part of your being. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, made a profound observation about human suffering. He said that suffering is not something we can avoid, but it is something we can give meaning to. Frankl's idea was revolutionary. He suggested that suffering, if faced with awareness, can lead to a higher sense of purpose. It's in the acceptance of our wounds, the embracing of our deepest vulnerabilities, that we find our strength. So why does this problem persist? Why do we keep returning to the same patterns, the same struggles, even when we know they originate from the same wound? Because we've been conditioned to believe that our wounds are weaknesses to be overcome. We've been taught that our gifts are separate from our pain, that strength is something to be achieved rather than integrated, and in this process, we fail to recognize the deep connection between the two. But as Jung argued, the path to individuation, the journey to becoming whole, is not about rejecting your shadow, your wound, or your pain. It's about embracing them, understanding their role in your life, and finding a way to integrate them into a more authentic self. The deeper question then becomes, how can you stop running from your wound and start seeing it as the key to your transformation? In the next section, we'll explore the unseen consequences of this dynamic. The ways in which your gift and your wound silently shape your reality, often without you realizing it. And we'll dive deeper into how these forces influence your behavior, relationships, and overall sense of self. You might believe that your strengths, the things you excel at, the gifts that define your identity, are completely under your control, that they are what propel you forward in life, what bring you success, recognition, and fulfillment. But what if, beneath the surface, these gifts are subtly shaping your reality in ways you can't see? What if they're not only leading you towards success, but also quietly sabotaging your peace, happiness, and sense of self? In this section, we'll explore how the dynamics of your gift and wound manifest in the unseen corners of your life, how they quietly govern your decisions, behaviors, and relationships, often without your conscious awareness. You've already begun to sense the tension between who you are and who you think you should be. But now, let's uncover the deeper, more insidious consequences of this unacknowledged dynamic. The cognitive bias of overcompensation. Think about it for a moment. The very qualities you take the most pride in, your intelligence, your ambition, your empathy, are also the things that often cause you the most distress. It's a strange, almost self-sabotaging paradox. You push yourself to be the best, to rise above, to perform at the highest level, but in doing so, you develop a kind of tunnel vision, where the need to prove yourself overshadows everything else. This is a form of overcompensation. In psychology, overcompensation is a defense mechanism where an individual tries to mask their perceived weaknesses by exaggerating their strengths. It's an unconscious attempt to protect yourself from the pain of vulnerability, from the fear that without your strengths, you are nothing. Perhaps you've noticed this in your own life. When you feel insecure or out of control, your natural impulse is to overachieve, to push yourself harder, to prove that you are capable. But this overcompensation often leads to burnout, isolation, and emotional exhaustion. You might gain external validation, but you can never escape the internal anxiety that comes with it. The hidden cost of perfectionism. Think about your pursuit of excellence. You may believe that being perfect, flawless, is the key to success, recognition, and love. But this obsession with perfection is not as innocent as it seems. Perfectionism, at its core, is a way of hiding from the fear of inadequacy, of feeling unworthy. You believe that by attaining perfection, you can outrun the pain of vulnerability. The problem is that perfectionism is a trap. It's a moving target that you'll never hit, because no matter how much you achieve, there's always something more you can do. And with each small step you take toward perfection, you push yourself further from acceptance, further from the raw, unpolished aspects of yourself that need healing. The more you attempt to perfect your image, whether it's through work, physical appearance, or social status, the more you distance yourself from the imperfect reality of being human. This dynamic doesn't just affect your personal psyche, it has profound implications for your relationships. If you're constantly chasing perfection, you might inadvertently place unrealistic expectations on others. Your partners, friends, and colleagues might feel like they're constantly falling short, never able to meet the impossible standards you've set for them. And yet, when they fail to meet these standards, it only reinforces the cycle of insecurity in you. You fear that, in your pursuit of excellence, you've pushed people away, while also intensifying your own sense of isolation. The paradox of relationships. This is where the wound becomes most visible. Our relationships often reflect the deepest parts of ourselves, the places where we feel vulnerable, afraid, and unworthy. When you're driven by the need to prove your worth, your relationships can become transactional, a constant exchange of validation, approval, and recognition. You want people to love you, not for who you truly are, but for the image you project, the perfect version of yourself that hides your wounds. At the same time, your wounds can sabotage your ability to connect deeply with others. Perhaps you've been the one to push people away because you can't stand the vulnerability of truly letting someone in. You might feel the urge to isolate yourself or maintain control in every situation, avoiding the messiness of emotional intimacy. It's as if you've created a wall between yourself and others, built from the very strength you once believed would protect you. Yet, paradoxically, you crave connection, understanding, and love. You want to be seen and accepted, but the more you chase these desires through the lens of your strengths, the more elusive they become. The more you try to control the narrative, the more you unintentionally alienate yourself from the very people who could help heal your wounds. The neuroscience of repression and self-sabotage. From a neurological perspective, this dynamic between your gifts and wounds is rooted in the way your brain processes pain, fear, and self-image. When you push away certain aspects of yourself, the parts of you that feel weak, inadequate, or broken, your brain literally represses them. This repression becomes a survival mechanism, a way to avoid the emotional discomfort of confronting what feels threatening. But the problem with repression is that it doesn't eliminate the wound, it buries it. And what's buried doesn't stay hidden, it leaks into your behavior in subtle ways. It can manifest as anxiety, stress, self-doubt, or perfectionism. The brain's desire to suppress pain only heightens your emotional reactivity to triggers, leading to patterns of self-sabotage. The moment you feel vulnerable or exposed, your unconscious mind will push you to overcompensate, to perform, to control the narrative. This is why many high achievers struggle with feelings of imposter syndrome. They've worked so hard to craft a perfect image of themselves, but deep down they're terrified that someone will uncover their wound, that they will be revealed as frauds, unworthy of the success they've achieved. And in this fear of being exposed, they perpetuate their own cycle of self-sabotage, the cultural reflection of the personal wound. But this dynamic isn't isolated to just you. It's a reflection of broader societal forces. Modern culture has become obsessed with success, achievement, and external validation. Social media platforms, with their constant stream of comparison, fuel this cycle. The idea of having it all together has become a societal norm. People proudly display their accomplishments, their best selves, while suppressing the raw, vulnerable aspects of who they are. This collective denial only magnifies the individual struggle. You see others excelling, achieving, and curating their lives, and it deepens the belief that your gifts are all that matter, that your wounds should remain hidden. But the collective wound is the same as the individual one. The more we hide our vulnerabilities, the more we amplify the pain that comes with being human. We become disconnected not only from our true selves but also from the rest of the world. This cultural disconnect feeds into the very struggles we face on a personal level. The need to perform, to prove our worth, to be seen as whole when we are anything but. And yet, this is the trap we continue to fall into. We build our identities around our strengths, our achievements, and our outward success, never fully realizing that these gifts, these perfections, are often the very things that keep us from the connection, healing, and peace we desperately seek. The consequences of this paradox are vast, subtle but profound. It shapes your behavior, your relationships, and your worldview in ways that go unnoticed until the cycle begins to unravel. But there is a way out. There is a path forward. In the next section, we'll explore how to break free from these hidden traps, how to radically shift your perspective and begin the journey of true transformation. The first step toward liberation is an uncomfortable. Able one, you must stop running from your wound. For years, you've been conditioned to believe that your wounds are something to be ashamed of, something to hide, something to fix. But in truth, they are the very gateway to your transformation. You must embrace the paradox. The very thing you've been avoiding is the key to breaking free. This isn't an easy task. You've spent your entire life building an identity around your strengths, hiding the parts of you that are fragile, broken, or unworthy. But the moment you confront the reality of this dynamic, the moment you stop pretending that your gifts are separate from your wounds, you begin to crack open the door to a new kind of freedom. Radical honesty with yourself. The journey toward freedom begins with radical honesty. It's not about finding more ways to perfect yourself or build an even stronger facade. It's about confronting the truth about who you are beneath the surface. This means acknowledging the fear, the pain, the inadequacy that you've been running from. Ask yourself the hard questions. What part of yourself have you been denying? What parts of you do you feel ashamed of? What weaknesses or vulnerabilities have you tried to cover up with achievement, power, or control? Carl Jung wrote that, "What you resist persists." This is why most of us spend our lives in an exhausting cycle of running from our shadow, because we've been taught that our weakness is something to hide, something to overcome. But the moment you bring that shadow into the light, it loses its power. It is no longer something that controls you from the darkness. To break free, you must confront the parts of you that you've spent a lifetime avoiding. This might mean acknowledging that your relentless drive for success is a mask for your fear of being insignificant, or that your emotional coldness is a defense against the pain of intimacy, or that your independence is rooted in a fear of rejection. You don't have to be ashamed of these truths. They are not who you are in your entirety, but they are part of the human experience, and more importantly, they are part of your experience. The role of vulnerability in healing. Once you've begun this process of radical honesty, the next step is to allow yourself to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is the doorway to connection and healing. It's the act of showing up as you truly are, imperfect, messy, raw. You've been conditioned to believe that vulnerability is a weakness, that it makes you less than in the eyes of the world. But the reality is that vulnerability is a strength, a paradoxical one perhaps, but one nonetheless. When you allow yourself to be vulnerable, you open the door to deeper relationships, to authentic connection. You show others that it's okay to be imperfect, to have flaws, to struggle. You remove the barrier between your inner and outer worlds, allowing the space for true intimacy to form. Nietzsche's will to power, reinterpreted. When Friedrich Nietzsche spoke about the will to power, he wasn't simply talking about the desire to control or dominate others. At its core, the will to power is the drive to affirm life in all its complexity, its beauty and its suffering, its strength and its weakness. To truly embody this concept means to embrace the fullness of your existence, not just the parts you show the world, but also the parts you've hidden from yourself. In other words, true power comes not from overcoming your weaknesses, but from accepting them and integrating them into the larger story of who you are. To reclaim your strength, you must first allow yourself to be weak. You must learn that power is not in control. It is in the ability to be both vulnerable and resilient in the face of your wound. This is why the most profound personal transformations are often the result of embracing pain and discomfort. Whether it's through addiction, heartbreak, or failure, these experiences crack open the shell of who you thought you were. They force you to confront your wound, to reframe your narrative, and to rebuild yourself from the inside out. In these moments, you stop pretending, you stop running, you start to see that your wound is not a weakness, but a wellspring of growth. Sartre's existential freedom. There's a key idea in Jean-Paul Sartre's existential philosophy that is essential to breaking free from your wounds. Freedom is found in choice. Sartre argued that we are condemned to be free. That is, we are always responsible for the choices we make, even in a world that seems chaotic and without meaning. This freedom can be overwhelming, but it also offers the ultimate possibility for transformation. Once you recognize that your wounds are a product of past choices, whether they are conscious or unconscious, you also realize that you have the power to choose a new path. You are not stuck in the identity you've built around your gifts and wounds. You can choose to let go of the patterns that no longer serve you. You can choose to step into a new reality, one where your weaknesses and strengths coexist in harmony, where your wounds don't define you, but rather shape the way you interact with the world. Breaking free from the cycle of validation, you also need to break free from the exhausting cycle of seeking external validation. For most of your life, you've measured your worth by how others see you, through the lens of your achievements, your success, your social status. But this is a hollow measure of self-worth, because it is always dependent on external factors. The more you seek validation from others, the more you become trapped in the very dynamics that prevent you from embracing your true self. The truth is that your worth is not determined by your achievements or how others perceive you. It is intrinsic, hidden beneath all the roles you play, beneath all the masks you wear. To break free, you must learn to validate yourself. Self-validation is the antidote to the external validation trap. This means acknowledging your intrinsic value, regardless of how much you accomplish or how others perceive you. Historical examples of radical rebirth. Throughout history, there are countless examples of individuals who broke free from the constraints of their own wounds, transforming their lives in profound ways. One such example is Viktor Frankl, who, after surviving the Holocaust, found meaning in the suffering he had endured. His philosophy was simple: even in the most harrowing circumstances, you have the freedom to choose your response. Frankl's insight is one of the most radical ways of thinking, that the human spirit is unbreakable, not because it is invulnerable, but because it is capable of transforming suffering into meaning. In his case, it was his experience of unimaginable pain and loss that gave him the strength to help others find their own purpose in life. His wound became his gift. This is the transformation you're capable of, a journey from identifying with your wounds as weaknesses to embracing them as a source of strength and wisdom. This is the rebellion, the breaking of the cycle of shame and overcompensation. True freedom comes from owning both your wounds and your strengths. The path to freedom is not linear. It requires a radical shift in perspective, a willingness to face the uncomfortable, and the courage to embrace vulnerability. But once you take that first step, once you choose to accept your wounds as part of the greater story of who you are, everything begins to shift. The mask starts to crack, the pressure begins to release, and you are free to live a life that is truly your own. In the final section, we will explore the ultimate truth, the realization that will not only reshape how you see yourself, but also transform your entire worldview. Get ready for the deepest, most powerful insight yet. Imagine you're standing at the edge of a vast, empty field. The horizon stretches endlessly before you, and the wind whispers through the tall grass, carrying a sense of something larger than yourself. A deep knowing stirs within you, a truth that has always been there, just beyond the reach of your conscious mind. And now, as you face this vast expanse, you come to understand something profound. You are not defined by your gifts. You are not defined by your wounds. In this final realization, everything you feared, resisted, and clung to falls away. The paradox that has held you captive, your gifts being simultaneously your wounds, suddenly makes sense in a way that is almost too vast to grasp. The constant struggle, the cycle of perfectionism, the fear of inadequacy, the need for external validation, all of it dissolves, leaving only a quiet, open space. What you've been chasing all this time is not a better version of yourself, but the acceptance of who you already are. Your strengths and weaknesses, your triumphs and failures, they are all part of the same whole, and none of them truly define you. They are simply the raw materials from which you create your life. The illusion of the self, the ultimate truth you must come to terms with, is the illusion of the self, the idea that there is a fixed, separate you who must protect your identity, your worth, and your place in the world. This is a fiction. There is no permanent, unchanging you that exists independently of your experiences, your thoughts, or your emotions. The self is fluid, dynamic, and ever-changing. As Jean-Paul Sartre would argue, you are not born with an essence, a predefined identity. You exist, and then you define yourself through your choices. The key, however, is in recognizing that these choices are not dictated by a fixed nature. They are an ongoing, conscious act of creation. The wound you carry is not something that limits you, but something that invites you to reshape and redefine yourself every day. This is where the radical power of existential freedom lies. Your freedom is not found in the pursuit of an idealized self, nor in the rejection of your imperfections. It is found in the constant, ongoing process of creating yourself, of embracing your gifts, your wounds, your struggles, and your triumphs as part of the same intricate story. They are not separate pieces. They are one whole, woven together by your choices, your actions, and your willingness to live fully. The power of acceptance and integration. What if the ultimate path to personal growth isn't through fixing yourself, but through accepting yourself as you are, right now, in all your complexity? What if the act of self-transformation begins not with striving for perfection, but with embracing your inherent imperfection? What if the wound, the very thing you've tried so desperately to hide or fix, is the doorway to a deeper sense of wholeness? This idea echoes deeply in the work of Carl Jung, who argued that the path to true self-realization lies in the integration of the shadow, the parts of ourselves that we deny, suppress, or reject. The shadow, Jung claimed, contains not just our darkness and flaws, but our potential. In other words, the wound is also the source of your greatest strength, creativity, and growth. It's a space that invites you to become whole, not by excluding parts of yourself, but by including them all. The gift of the wound. In this light, the wound becomes a gift, a portal to a deeper understanding of who you are. As Friedrich Nietzsche famously said, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." This quote is often interpreted as a call to overcome adversity, but there's a deeper nuance to it. What doesn't kill you becomes integrated into your being. The pain, the failure, the weakness, these aren't things you have to erase or transcend. They are things you must embrace. The wounds you've carried through life, whether from your childhood, your relationships, or your failures, are not marks of shame. They are invitations to explore new dimensions of your humanity. In them lies the possibility for transcendence. When you stop resisting them, stop trying to turn them into something else, they lose their power over you. The wound, once accepted, becomes the very source of your wisdom, your depth, and your authenticity. Transcending the fear of vulnerability. To live fully is to live without the constant fear of exposure, rejection, or inadequacy. The final realization is that vulnerability is not something to protect against, but something to lean into. Vulnerability is where you experience life in its rawest form. It's where you feel the full range of your emotions, your joy, your sorrow, your love, and your pain. The more you lean into vulnerability, the more expansive your sense of self becomes. This is where the wound transforms from something that limits you into something that frees you. You are not weak for being vulnerable. You are strong because you are willing to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is the portal through which you can connect with others on the deepest level, and ultimately connect with yourself. In the vastness of your being, there are no perfect parts, no unblemished areas, no flawless achievements. There is only you, whole and integrated, embracing both the light and the dark. When you stop trying to perfect yourself, you realize that you are already complete. The final paradox, embracing imperfection.